Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 289, Nunes versus Aldana. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well myself. As usual, we are less than 24 hours removed from discussing the last card, which would have been UFC Vegas 74. There was plenty to talk about there. We can only hope for as interesting a showing this Saturday in Vancouver. The UFC is, of course, headed back to Canada for the first time in a while, and the card reflects it. I'm looking at this card, and you're familiar with this, of course, because Mrs. Shillan is Canadian, but in Canada, there's a regulation on their radio stations that requires that a certain percentage of the music on popular radio stations, like the rock, pop, hip hop stations, has to be quote unquote Canadian content. It means a certain percentage of it has to be written or performed or produced by Canadian artists. So when you're up there,
I did not know that.
When you're up there as an American, you just end up hearing a lot of stuff that you don't recognize. And some of it is Canadian artists that you do recognize. You hear some
Brian Adams.
Rush or Brian Adams on the classic rock station. You hear some Celine Dion. You hear some like Nickelback. But then there'll be stuff like, what is this? And it's not great. And you're just like, well, I guess this sounds really Canadian. This card sounds really Canadian to me. I mean, you cannot fault the top two fights. Amanda Nunes, depending on depending on what your criteria are, you can call her the best fighter in the sport.
Amanda is the greatest female fighter of all time.
Yeah, she's the greatest female fighter of all time.
That's not.
I mean, she's
unless you Scott Coker.
Yeah, unless you Scott Coker, and then the co-main event, Charles the Bronx Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush. If you don't like that fight, go slap yourself right now. Why are you even watching MMA?
Yeah.
But south of that, this is a thin pay-per-view offering. Like when your third fight from the top is Mike Malott and Adam Fugitt.
Yeah, what the Fugitt on that
one? I mean, Danny Ige versus Nate Landwehr is probably going to be a real exciting fight.
Sure.
But the UFC did everything it could to get as many Canadian fighters on here as possible. Hakeem Dawoodi was meant to be on this card, and had to withdraw. But I'm not sure whether this is just the reality of UFC pay-per-views in the 2020s, or this is an indictment of where the Canadian talent level is right now. But this is rough stuff, man. I mean, tell me I'm wrong, or tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, you're forgetting one thing, Ben, and that's the UFC is now in partnership with the WWE, and this is when we're finally going to get it. It's a big surprise. Like, wait, why is the main event going off at like 11:30? Like, why? That's so weird. Why'd they rush everything? And all of a sudden, Anderson Silva comes out, and he's going to fight somebody, and out comes George Rush St. Pierre, and we finally get Silva versus St. Pierre. That's the big surprise.
I thought you were going to go straight like 80s wrestling, and you're going to tell me like Iron Mike Sharp was going to come out and
is he Canadian?
Iron Mike Sharp was Canadian. Yeah,
I was a little embarrassed last time we talked about Canadian wrestlers, and I didn't know that Roddy Piper was a Canadian.
Yeah,
I was very chained by that as someone who's a big time 80s wrestling guy. You know what this card feels to me? It feels like, if you were putting this card together, you go to Sherdog Fight Finder, like, okay, the main event hasn't been announced yet. Like they're working on something. If you took Alex Volkanovski and Yair Rodriguez and just threw this on the card as a main event,
boom,
then it's regular. Then it's your regular pay-per-view. Now I get some issues with some of the placement of the fights. Like, why is Imavov and Curtis so low? Why isn't that on the main card? I think you can make an argument for Miranda, Maverick, and Jasudavicius to be on the main card. I mean, they might not want to do two female fights on the main card or something like that, but that's the only. It's just missing that one thing. And I legit feel bad for Canadian fans because you've been waiting 3 years, there was a time, I mean, obviously, it doesn't matter who is the stars at the time. Obviously, when George St. Pierre was the star of the sport, you get more Canadian cards.
Yeah.
Which is what happens. It's why we get, them doing cards in Australia and different places.
Even after St. Pierre retired, it just seemed like the UFC decided that they were going to go with John Jones or Max Holloway anytime they went up to Canada. And that's not bad either.
No, I know.
Yeah.
What a weird connection. Like, especially like I know that Max Holloway was calling it the ninth island and all that.
Yeah, but at the same time, he's like, "Why are you doing this to me? It's so cold up here."
Yeah, that didn't make sense at all. But it's why we get more cards in like Australia, New Zealand than we will 10 years from now when Adesanya and Volkan. I mean, obviously, I don't know if there'll be a new star from there. There probably will be, but you get my point. But still, to wait this long, 3 years, there was a lot of reports about the Canada's finally coming back to Canada. We've seen what they did when they were in Montreal and Toronto. They had some like historically, like not only is it good cards, but it's good crowds.
Yes.
And then you kind of give them this. And I know this might not have been the plans. Things happen. Guys get injured. You're hoping, you're hoping to put a light heavyweight title fight, but then this guy gets hurt or pushed back. I understand this. There's more logistics that we don't know.
Well, and question, obviously this wasn't even intended to be Nunes versus Aldana until a month or two ago. It was going to be Nunes versus Pena 3. I know that you're probably with me and you like the fresh matchup better, but do you think the UFC is happy?
Yeah, I think they're okay with it because it's not like there was a lot of buzz for Julian and Pena. Now, I think it would have been better timing to have Julian and Pena because then you just end the trilogy. You don't have Julian Pena, like she talks, but she doesn't have natural charisma where there's a lot of people who really like her.
And also, Vancouver is very close to where she lives, Seattle.
Oh, actually that's a good point too. That's a really good point. So she might
right now. UFC is probably like, damn, we should have had this card in Mexico.
Oh, absolutely.
You put this one in Mexico City, altitude, people wondering about Nunes' cardio and the weight cut at like 7,000 feet.
Oh, shit. Yeah. That might change someone's pick. You're sitting there, you're like, I'm taking Amanda Nunes, and all of a sudden you added altitude or whatever. We've seen it happen to other people. Yeah, that's a really good point.
I don't want to go too much further here, or we'll just start previewing the main event. We got 10 other fights to talk about. Shall we dive into these, or you got any other general thoughts about the card first?
No, so I wanted to say this real quick. Actually, two things. Before I forget, I already forgot the guy's name. So you know me, I never watch other people's previews. There's a lot of previews out there. There's a lot of really good quality previews. Like it's not like it's more of when you dig into all these notes and all the stuff that we look at the fights, like for about the 2 days, I'm not going to look at, I won't watch the countdown show about Wednesday when I'll get back into the card, usually when I'm putting my notes together, I have music in the background or I got like some YouTube video playing. So I came across one. I wanted to give this guy a shout out. It was Ultimate Fighting Talk, I think it was called, and I apologize. I should have wrote this down. But he was a young kid. Like he was like, I hope if he sees this, I'm not insulting him. Like he looked like he was like 20 years old, 17. Maybe he was really young, but he was sharp. Like it was really good info that the guys give out. So just shout out to that guy. If you see this, correct me in the comments and put your name in there. I apologize, but yeah, I told him I'd give him a shout out. Second. When we say this is a bad card, like, yes, I'd still rather watch a bad card than watch a baseball game.
Yes. MMA, when it's good, it's great. When it's bad, it's still pretty damn good. The UFC 289 prelims kick off with a strawweight matchup between Diana Belbita and Maria Oliveira. Belbita, the 26-year-old Romanian, is 14-7 overall. She's 1-3 in the UFC. She is 1-1 since dropping to 115 pounds. She opened up her UFC run with a pair of losses at flyweight, dropped down, and won her first fight at strawweight against Hannah Goldie by unanimous decision. Her second appearance at 115 pounds was last February, at UFC Fight Night Walker versus Hill, where she dropped a unanimous decision to Gloria de Paula. She will be facing Oliveira. The 26-year-old Brazilian is 13-6 overall. She is 1-2 in the UFC. She's coming off a loss. She fought most recently in November at UFC Fight Night Zechikwu versus Kudalaba, where she lost a unanimous decision to Vanessa Demopoulos. Odds on this one are fairly close, but Oliveira is the slight favorite. She's minus 125. Belbita plus 105 as the underdog. Keith, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I'm not super high on either of these as a prospect. I was semi-high on Belbita coming in just because of her kickboxing background. But right now, I mean, I don't mean this to be mean, but she has a pound for pound Instagram, but that's about it. Like she's not showing too much in the cage.
Yeah,
tell me who you got winning this one.
Yeah, I gotta go to the Instagram more. I'm an old man. I do the Facebook more than I do the Instagram.
Well, just go Instagram now, because if the UFC cuts her, it'll be OnlyFans.
You'll have to pay for it. Yeah, pay for it. Okay. Belbita, I'll say this: she's a pretty dynamic striker. She's got some K1 experience. She's a Chris striking, good jab, throws straight shots down the middle. She keeps everything inside tight, mixes kicks well with her punches. I think she has a good kicking game, but she doesn't check leg kicks. Pretty good footwork. I like that she, cuts angles well, sidestep in. She'll L step on the defense. Has a traditional Muay Thai clinch game where she gets in there, batters her knees inside. She looks to a foot sweep. So while you started off with a negative, I just said super positive things about her, but I haven't got to the negative part, and that is she's a terrible ground fighter. Poor takedown defense. Molly McCann looked like Khabib Nurmagomedov against her. Molly McCann was battering her. She got submitted by Luana Jojua, which hasn't. That's not Mackenzie Dern subbing you. So that is
it's Liana Jojo's only UFC win is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I was gonna say that, but I wasn't sure if that was her only one. Maria Oliveira is long and lengthy, very similar kickboxer. She likes to work from the outside. I like her volume. She's a serviceable boxer. Her hands are okay, but it's her kicks. Kicks are her game. She kicks everywhere, big calf kicks. She'll often throw kicks without a setup, which leaves her open for counters, keeps her chin high in the air. She also backs straight up on the center line, which I don't like. And often she can be pressured back to the fence. Now, she was dropped by Vanessa Demopoulos on the feet, which is extremely concerning in this fight. When she gets inside, though, she uses her size well. She looks for elbows in there, wears on the clinch. She will sneak in a takedown occasionally, but she's definitely not a grappler. But she does have a submission win, though she struggled to get off the bottom against Vanessa Demopoulos. This fight makes a lot of sense that it's a coin toss, as the loser of this fight is going to the Cutlass. Despite being the smaller fighter, I think Belbita is the better striker. She's the more credentialed one. However, I'm going to go with Oliveira because she's more well-rounded, and I can see her getting to the clinch and getting a takedown. It'd make a lot of sense for her to wear on and Belbita and try to get a takedown, play it a little more safe. I think she's superior on the ground. So that's one area between these two that I know she's superior. If we have an early stoppage, it's probably Oliveira catching a submission or something. But I have zero confidence. If it stays on the feet, I think Belbita wins. But I'm going to go with Oliveira. I'm going to say she gets. I originally wrote decision, but I'm going to say she gets a submission. I'll say Oliveira by second round submission.
Yeah, I see a lot of this fight the same way you do. My hopes, I guess, for Diana Belbita when she signed with the UFC were that she would kind of turn into the poor woman's Ariane Lipski, and even that's a pretty modest expectation considering that Ariane Lipski has been a borderline bust. But you pointed it out. She looks like what she is, a former high level kickboxer, but the ground game has just not come along. It's been bad, and despite her being big for the division in terms of just the eyeball test, just she's not only been unable to stop the takedown, but has been unable to stay out of situations where women can try for the takedown. Like any UFC flyweight or strawweight that has wanted to get her to the ground has basically been able to. Even though these women are the same age, they're both 26 years old. They both have roughly the same number of fights. Oliveira feels more like a prospect and a work in progress. And so, even though it's been much longer since Belbita fought, if either of these women has improved a lot or shored up a lot of their weaknesses since the last time they fought, I expect it to be Oliveira. Belbita at 26 and with 4 UFC fights already feels like a bit of a finished product. And that finished product is not UFC level, I don't think. I actually thought she'd been let go after her last loss, after the loss to DePaula. That was her 4th UFC fight. I thought that she had not been re-signed after her first 4-fight deal. Either I was wrong about that or she's been re-signed, but I don't think it's going to get off to a good start here. I'm with you. I think the striking slightly favors her if this fight is conducted entirely on the feet, but I just don't trust that to happen. Belbita is not going to be able to avoid collisions. Those collisions are going to end in clinch situations, and those are going to end up with these women on the ground at some point. And from there, I do heavily favor Oliveira. Give me Oliveira by decision. And as you say, that might be curtains for Belbita. We'll see. Next up at UFC 289 is a flyweight matchup between David Dvorak and Steve Erceg. Dvorak, the 30-year-old Czech, is 20-5 overall. He is 3-2 in the UFC. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. The first 2 losses of his UFC career, 2 losses that snapped a 16-fight win streak that had him rocketing up the flyweight rankings worldwide. But he fought most recently back in December, dropping a unanimous decision to Manel Kape. Prior to that, he fought most recently in March, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Matheus Nickal. So very much looking to recover some of his momentum is Dvorak. He had been scheduled to take on Matt Schnell. Schnell dropped out within the last week or so, and in steps the debuting Steve Erceg. The 27-year-old Australian is 9-1 overall. He is on an 8-fight win streak, almost all of it in Eternal MMA, one of Australia's top 2 promotions. He fought most recently in February, picking up a first-round submission. He steps in here on about a week and a half, 2 weeks notice. Dvorak had been a minus 175 favorite over Schnell. Schnell coming in around plus 140. Dvorak shoots up immediately to be the biggest favorite on the card. He is minus 500, Erceg plus 385. And to Keith, who makes a point of not looking at the odds going into these previews, I just tipped him off that Nunes is less than a minus 500 favorite there. Dvorak is the biggest favorite on the card.
I wonder what that would be if Pena didn't get that win.
Whew.
You know what I mean? What he would be?
It would be
I'm sure it's
nearing Shevchenko territory. It'd be minus 800, minus 900, I bet. But yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to it. Keith, David Dvorak, man with a lot to prove. I mean, he is still in the Sherdog flyweight top 15. He's like in the 15 spot, despite not having won a fight since like 2021. Do you still see any upside for this guy? Is he still a future contender? And can Steve Erceg teach us anything about him?
Sorry, I'm still on the Diana Belbita's Instagram. No. Do I see potential? Absolutely, I see potential. Is he a future title challenger? That's tough. There's a lot of really good quality flyweights right now. Do we learn anything about Erceg? Erceg, if I'm saying it correctly.
Erceg. Yeah,
Erceg.
Erceg. Yeah.
Erceg. If Erceg beats him, then the answer to the first 2 questions are no. So I think there is something we learned. You said Dvorak was going to be like a negative 185 favorite against. Is that what you said? Negative
against Schnell, yeah, minus 175.
Yeah, 175. Yeah, I'm a little surprised by that. Like, not that he was the favorite. Just surprised it'd be that big. I thought maybe like negative 130, negative 140. Dvorak, he's big for the weight class. Like, he's just a big dude. I'm sure he probably struggles to get down to flyweight because how big he is. He's a long and lengthy guy. He's a counter striker. He loves that overhand right. He's got some good pop in his hands, and that's because he keeps his legs underneath him and to land power shots. He's got a big kicking game. Not much of a traditional wrestler, but we have seen him wrestle a little bit more lately. Like he wrestled at Beneil Cop when he could, took him down twice, which was smart. Pretty good at winning scrambles. Though I was surprised, I mean, going back to his UFC debut when Bruno Silva took him down 3 times, but I think we both agree Bruno Silva was pretty solid himself. And Dvorak is a threat on the ground. He's got 8 submission wins. Now, Erceg, he's 27 years old, so you like that coming in. It's hard to get a grasp on his skills because he has so many quick stoppages. You don't get to watch that much. He's also a big guy. He's got some pop in his hands. I watched this one fight where he laid a guy out with, it might have been the first punch he threw. Though his hands aren't that quick, and he doesn't look like a great athlete. He has some defensive holes. He stands a little tall. He keeps his chin high in the air. He lacks head movement. He throws a lot of kicks, but a lot of them are naked, and he's going to get cracked for that. He's good on the ground, though. He's a solid wrestler. I should say more of a grappler than a wrestler, but he finds ways to get the fight to the ground, and he got some slick submissions. He got 6 sub wins. I watched one where he jumped on a guillotine really quick. Taking Dvorak in your debut on, I think you said a week and a half, 2. I don't think it was even. Oh yeah, because we're almost a week away. So yeah, okay, yeah, week and a half, 2 weeks.
Yeah,
that's tough. I think Erceg looks like a guy that could be a UFC talent, based on, but like I said, he's beating us so quick, it's hard to really assess him. I think he's more contender series avenue. Like, I don't think he was a guy that, and you could say, oh, what's the difference? I mean, there really isn't a difference. It's the timing. But I mean, what I mean by all that is there's some guys who come to UFC and you're like, but this guy's a prospect. It's almost insulting to throw him on the contender series. That's not the case with Erceg. No, I think Erceg's best avenue for victory is to wrestle and catch submission. But can his cardio hold up in such a heavy wrestling game on short notice? That I don't know. That's a big mystery. That said, I'm taking Dvorak. He's a crisp striker. I say he lands some hard shots on the feet. I think he gets it done pretty early. Actually, I think Dvorak's going to finish him. Give me Dvorak by second round TKO.
Okay, let the record show that Keith is still bitter that Bo Nickal had to fight twice on the contender series.
Oh, there you go. You got the Bo Nickal. Right? I was saving that one for later. Nice job.
I'm with you here. The nice thing about someone like Steve Erceg stepping up on short notice is that all of his fights are readily available in high quality, like, video format. That's a nice thing.
Yeah. It's just quick. It's very quick.
They're just quick.
Yeah.
And you're right. He's blown through overmatched competition with aggression and a really nice, solid submission game. And I agree with you that at the level of people he's been fighting, he's figured out ways to get the fight to the ground. Not even talking about the Dvorak fight, because I mean, I think barring something shocking, this is not going to be his night. But even assuming he gets 2 more fights in the UFC, I'm not sure that he's going to be able to get a UFC flyweight to the ground that doesn't want to go. But he is tall and long. You mentioned, you said Dvorak's big, Erceg is big. Erceg is like Charles Johnson big. Like, he's long torso, long arms. Like, he's a big dude, where Dvorak is more of the compact. I mean, I said this about Kai Kara-France last week, where the tail of the tape doesn't really tell you kind of how big the guy is. Dvorak obviously, had a ton of momentum coming into his first couple of UFC fights, and that was blunted once he ran into top 10 fighters. Once he ran into Matheus Nicolau, Manel Kape. He's been generally competitive. I mean, the Manel Kape fight, it is as competitive a fight as I can think of where I gave one guy all 3 rounds. Like, I scored all 3 rounds for Kape, but no, like, Dvorak was there in all 3 rounds. He had his moments. None of the rounds was a washing. The fight itself was not a washing. But at age 30 and with a lot of experience and a kind of very defined style, this might be as good as David Dvorak gets. He might just be the gatekeeper to the top 10, where if you're a top 10 guy, you're going to get past him. It's not going to be easy. If you're not that level, he's going to punish you. His first 3 wins in the UFC, Jordan Espinosa and Juan Camilo Ronderos are no great shakes, but beating Bruno Silva has really aged well.
Oh yeah, I
Like-
think Espinosa was a decent win at that time.
Agreed. It was good at that time, whereas Silva was whatever at the time, and now Silva's on a 3-fight win streak, and he himself is cruising towards the rankings. Here, Erceg needs to get this fight to the ground. I don't think he's going to be able to, and I think Dvorak is going to exploit and expose Erceg's deficiencies on the feet. I expect that Dvorak's just going to catch Erceg coming in with like an intercepting knee as he changes levels for a takedown, or he's just going to come in and swat him with a big overhand and knock him out. Give me Dvorak by first round knockout here. And he's in that situation. And we talk about this it feels like every week. When you're a good fighter and all of a sudden you get a short notice opponent and you're a minus 500 favorite, it's almost a no-win situation because you're expected to run through the guy. But unless Dvorak is really compromised or he's not the guy we thought he was, he should hold serve here. Yeah, I have Dvorak by first round knockout. We head now to the featherweight division for a matchup between Canada's Kyle Nelson and Blake Bilder. Nelson, the 32-year-old from Ontario, is 13-5-1 overall. He is 1-4-1 in the UFC. He fought to a draw his last time out against Doo Ho Choi. That was back at the Lewis versus Spivak fight night in February. It was a majority draw, which the majority of observers, myself included, actually thought Choi should have won, but it goes down as a draw, probably saving Nelson's job, though it's an open question whether the UFC would have re-signed him for this card anyway, since Canadian. But yeah, but for the grace of God, he'd be on a 3-fight losing streak. He's going to try to get back on track here against Bilder. The 32-year-old Minnesota native is 8-0-1 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of the 6th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He made his debut in February at UFC 284, taking a unanimous decision over Shane Young in a pretty significant upset. So he'll be looking to build on that momentum, no pun intended, and he is favored to do so. Bilder minus 220, Nelson plus 175. Keith, there's a decent argument to be made that Kyle Nelson shouldn't be in the UFC right now. If he'd lost the decision to Choi, he probably would have been cut. I mean, he would have been 1-5 in the UFC. Does he save his job here? How does this fight look?
I mean, this is definitely a winnable fight for him. And it's in his home country, which they always kind of get a little bit of buzz going in there. Nelson, he's a boxer who really kind of whips his overhands, though his straight shots are his best blow. I'd say it's decent pop. I like that he works the body. He has some hard calf kicks, though he often throws them naked. And he doesn't throw them enough. Like he has having success against Troy with leg kicks, and I think he should have went to that well more than he did. He can grind in the clinch, will sneak in a takedown. He's got 4 submission wins. But the 2 big negatives about Kyle Nelson I've seen is that he's a poor athlete, which obviously limits his overall skill. And then the other thing is his gas tank. I mean, he's gassed against Jai Herbert. He gassed against Billy Quarantillo. In fairness, Billy Quarantillo gasses everyone. And then when you go through his record and who he's lost to, like losing to Jai Herbert and Billy Quarantillo, like those aren't bad losses.
Diego Ferreira on short notice in 2018.
Yeah,
that sucks, dude.
Yeah. What's the bad loss he had? He does have
Matt Sales. Matt Sales.
Matt Sales.
Great.
Yeah. Blake Bilder, he's a good output striker. Like he's very classic boxer, uses footwork well to avoid shots, bounces his head off the center line well. Even when he gets tagged, he rolls with shots so they don't, you don't absorb all the power of the shot. He also pillars, which I don't like, but I kind of named all the levels of defense. So he kind of does them all. So you see that he's really classically boxed because you use him so much in all those, the matches he does and stuff. He keeps everything inside tight. I should mention, despite having all those defenses, he's been hurt a lot more than you want, especially on the regional scene. But when he gets inside, he unloads some power hooks. He's got some plus power. Due to his boxing style, he doesn't check leg kicks. When pressure back, he does do well to lower his level and get a takedown. He's will shoot without a setup, which is a little disturbing. But he's a strong grappler. He's got some slick back takes. He's got 4 submission wins. And he does have the gas tank to go hard all 15 minutes, and he has really good volume. Not a lot of confidence in this pick, but I'm leaning Bilder. Nelson's calf kicks is probably his best avenue for victory against a heavy boxer. He isn't the athlete. I think Bilder is the better boxer. I like his overall ground game better. I like his volume better, and I like his cardio better. So the deeper it goes in the fight, the more I think Bilder can do well. So I think Bilder wins everywhere. Give me Bilder by decision.
Yeah, I'm with you here. The first couple fights on this card, David Dvorak is individually a high-level fighter, but generally speaking, a lot of this undercard is not super high-level fights, and this is one of them. And here,
Ben, I'm still on Belbita's Instagram page. I will never say anything negative about her.
I told you.
Can I switch my pick?
Pound for pound.
Switch my pick now.
I think Blake Bilder is probably a UFC level featherweight, even if he's not a future contender, whereas I'm pretty sure that Kyle Nelson is not. And that's kind of where I draw the line. And you pointed out the specifics. Bilder throws better volume. He's much better on the ground, and he has a better gas tank. Even though Nelson is going to be bigger by the eyeball test, he's a very long, lanky featherweight. I think Bilder is physically stronger as well. Yeah, everything I see here favors Bilder to win. I wish Bilder had gotten into MMA sooner. I mean, he was almost 28 at the time of his pro debut. He was 32 when he hit the UFC. And the thing is, he has a sneaky, interesting personality. He has some interesting backstory. He's a hell of a self-promoter. You can see the guy in between his second and third pro fights, just cutting ridiculous promos and giving hilarious interviews. He's got some rap songs out there. They're not good, but that almost adds to the joy of the whole thing. Yeah, I think Bilder's going to be a guy that I could see him becoming like a guy like Marcus Davis was 12 or 15 years ago, where he was really dangerous for a little while and beat some good people, but he was so old when he got to the UFC level that there was, there's a limited window of time to work. Here, I also enjoy that in his debut, he went and beat Shane Young in Australia, and now I'm picking him to go beat Kyle Nelson in Canada. I just want Blake Bilder to go on a world tour and just go beat people in their home countries.
Yeah, that's it.
Send him down to Brazil and have him bust up Moicano or somebody. UFC goes to Sweden. Just put Blake Bilder on the spoiler tour.
The Carmen Sandiego of the UFC.
Where in the world is Blake Bilder? I got Bilder by decision here, but if Nelson really starts to fade late, wouldn't surprise me if Bilder jumps on him and chokes him out in the third round either. In fact, give me that. Give me Bilder by third round submission. I could see him just getting an arm triangle on an exhausted Nelson in the third round. So yeah, Bilder sub round 3.
We should Bilder. Who's that? Who's the other guy that raps the Brian? What's his name? Long Island guy.
Kelleher.
Brian Kelleher.
Kelleher, Bilder, and
the Russian one, the Russian guy. The one that the guy he raps the Russian.
I can't think of him. Right now, I'm thinking of Bryce Mitchell raps.
Oh,
Bryce Mitchell's actually good. No, that's the weird thing.
Of all them,
Bryce Mitchell can barely speak a coherent sentence, but he's a good rapper. It's wild.
Oh, Alexander Yakovlev.
Alexander Yakovlev rapped.
He raps. He's got a music video and everything.
Is it terrible?
Huh?
Is it terrible?
I mean, it's in Russian, so I don't know.
All right. Next up at UFC 289, Keith, what would you rather witness? A three-way rap battle between Blake Bilder, Brian Kelleher, and Alexander Yakovlev, or a fight between Aiemann Zahabi and Aori Qileng?
I think I'd rather see Aiemann Zahabi and Qileng have a rap battle against each other.
Just one dude rapping in French, the other one in Chinese. I'm down.
Yeah, we gotta. I don't know if it's possible. We gotta get like a Bilder rap. The exit song. We gotta have him rapping at the end, or one of these guys, Yakovlev's rap song. Make it happen, then.
If the UFC were KSW, one of those dudes would have wrapped himself out to the cage by now. Like, anyway, unfortunately, I offered you a choice that it's not really within my power to grant. What we have is a fight between Zahabi and Aori Qileng. So let's get into it. Zahabi, the 35-year-old Canadian, is 9-2 overall. He's 3-2 in the UFC. He's on a 2-fight win streak. He fought once in 2021, knocking out Greco Rodriguez. He fought once in 2022, back in July, taking a unanimous decision over Ricky Turcios. He'll look to make it 3 in a row and keep up his 1 fight per year clip against Qileng. The 29-year-old from Inner Mongolia is 24-9 overall. He is 2-2 in the UFC. He dropped his first 2, both in 2021, came back last year and won both of his fights, knocking out Cameron Else and taking a unanimous decision over Jay Perrin at UFC 278 in August. So he also looking to make 3 wins in a row in the UFC. He is a slight favorite to do so. Aori Qileng -130, Zahabi -110, or sorry, Zahabi +110 as the slight underdog. Keith, when you have a matchup of unranked fighters on the UFC undercard, whether it be a fight night or a pay-per-view, a regular pay-per-view, or one of the biggest ones of the year, the best you can hope for is that at least one of the unranked guys is a prospect that you're excited about and might be ranked one day, or that the fight at least promises fireworks. It's one or both of them are designated action fighters. You can't really say either of those things about this fight. Tell me what is good about this fight and who you think wins.
Yeah. So Aiemann Zahabi, it's tough grasping this guy because I think of him as a prospect, and then you realize he's 35, and it's because he only has 5 fights in the UFC, but he haven't won every year, so he still seems kind of new to me. And you're like, oh my god, no, like he's at the point where you should be in a decline, especially at that weight class, simply because he just never fights. When he does, he's a boxer. He's a technically sound. He's a traditional, Zahabi type prodigy. Where it's work behind a jab, follow up with punches down the pipe. He did show some power against Rodriguez, though. I wouldn't count on it. And sometimes the issue with him is his output. Like he can be really low output, single strikes. He keeps his head a little high. He lacks head movement. He has good kicks, but again, he doesn't throw them enough. His calf kicks are probably the best part of his game. He does like to close the distance and battle the clinch. His Muay Thai style of striking, helps him in the clinch because he has that like traditional Muay Thai plum clinch. He will wrestle, but he doesn't have a wrestling background. So he'll get to the fight to the ground, but he's not going to take down strong wrestlers. He's probably weak defensively with his wrestling. He is good at keeping his hips moving and kind of creating some separation to get back to his feet. I give him that. And he is a little bit of a submission threat. Now, Qileng, he's a big bantamweight. He's long and lengthy. He's an accurate striker. He hits hard. Really steps into his shots. Go back to like Jeff Molina. He hurt Jeff Molina, which is, regardless of how you feel about Jeff Molina is a solid fighter.
Jeff Molina's on like an 11-fight win streak. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that big. Yeah. No, I meant with like the whole Glory MMA and the betting and all that stuff that his controversy and he's and there's other stuff. I'm not gonna get the other stuff, but long range kicker. he likes to throw a flying knee to close the distance. He will use his size in the clinch, and look for some takedowns himself, upper body takedowns, throws. He showed some wrestling against Jeff Molina, landed some really good hard ground and pound against Cameron Else or Elsie, how we say his name. He showed some decent takedown events against Cody Durden, which has aged well because Cody Durden's on a nice run himself. But he has still been, he was still taken down by Cody Durden 5 times. So, and he can go hard for 15 minutes, which I like. It would be smart if Zahabi wrestles. Even though I just talked about some Qileng's defensive wrestling, I still favor Zahabi there. But I'm going with Qileng. Neither guy really presses the action, but Qileng is at the age where he can still improve. And Zahabi's at the age where he's probably going to see a decline. He hits harder of the two, like he hits harder than Zahabi. So give me Qileng to land the better shots, and I say he wins I'll say he wins a decision.
Yeah, I wish I had some other analysis to offer here, some other angle, but I see it exactly the same as you do. It's with Zahabi, you pointed out that he feels like he should still be a prospect, but he's 35 years old and he's been in the UFC for over 6 years now. He has 5 fights in 6 years. I mean, he was a borderline prospect at some point and he has good individual skills, but they've never come together. And you mentioned that at this point, as a 35-year-old bantamweight, you have to wonder if the top gear has slipped a little bit. The athleticism that already wasn't off the charts is starting to decline. And on top of that, when you're talking about a guy that fights once a year, and I mean, honestly, do you think he would have fought this year if the UFC hadn't gone to Canada? Maybe not. You also have to wonder what's his level of commitment to fighting. Not only is he probably not adding new wrinkles or addressing his flaws, but like, is he just slipping in terms of skills at this point? It's hard to have any confidence in Zahabi. And with Aori Qileng, I think we've probably kind of seen him top out as a UFC fighter, but what he's got is enough to beat Zahabi. I just have more confidence in him just about everywhere. I expect that he will apply some offensive wrestling here, get Zahabi down a couple times, chip away, do enough damage to win rounds, not get stood back up. It probably won't be a super pretty fight, but give me Aori Qileng probably to win all 3 rounds. We head now to the women's flyweight division for a matchup between Miranda Maverick and Jasmine Jasudavicius. Maverick, the 25-year-old Missouri native, by way of Virginia, I believe, is 11-4 overall. She is 4-2 in the UFC. She's on a 2-fight win streak. Fought twice last year, winning both times. She choked out Sabina Mazo in March and then came back in November at UFC Fight Night, Rodriguez versus Lemos, and took a unanimous decision over Shayna Young. She will look to make it 3 in a row against Jasudavicius. The 34-year-old Canadian is 8-2 overall. She's 2-1 since joining the UFC out of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. She is coming off a win as well, a unanimous decision over Gabriela Fernandez at UFC Fight Night, Muniz versus Allen back in February. Odds here, Maverick, a prohibitive favorite. She is minus 300. Jasudavicius plus 240. I see this as a meeting of 2 fighters where my perceptions of them, at least, are kind of meeting in the middle, because I was very high on Miranda Maverick as a prospect going back to her days in Invicta, where, I mean, she lost a couple fights, but they were to bigger, much more experienced women, older women, and like Brogan Walker, Deanna Bennett. And when she got to the UFC and won her first couple, and she beat Pearl Gonzalez on her way out of Invicta, which was a pretty good win at the time. I had her right up there in the bucket with Macy Barber, Erin Blanchfield. This Manon Fior arrived around the same time. since I mean, she's had setbacks to Barber and Blanchfield. I've stepped back a little bit on Maverick, though I still think of her pretty highly. But if you'd asked me in 2020 or 2021, I might have called her the class of the bunch, yeah, even over Blanchfield. Like I didn't come around on Blanchfield quite as quickly as you did. Jasudavicius, on the other hand, I really underestimated. Coming like even coming into and coming into the Contender Series, I remember I don't know what duties I had, but I must have had some because I remember doing tape study on her ahead of her Contender Series fight, and I watched her lose to Elise Reed in CFFC. It's like, okay, she's not going to win on the Contender Series, and if she does, she's not going to do anything in the UFC. And I was wrong.
Hold on a second. In fairness, Elise Reed has phenomenal hand speed.
Oh yeah. Oh, Laura Sanko, you already got the job. Don't start doing that now.
Yeah. Oh, shout out to our great friend Laura Sanko.
Oh, Laura Sanko's amazing, but it was just funny because she normally doesn't go in for that kind of thing. But yeah, the blistering, 1999 Vitor Belfort-esque hand speed of Elise Reed. Anyway, I understand why Maverick is a favorite here. I am shocked that the line is what it is because here's the thing. Maverick is a better athlete than Jasudavicius.
Yeah.
The best individual skill either one of them probably has is Maverick's striking, specifically, her kicking game. But Maverick will have to fight an incredibly disciplined fight to beat Jasudavicius. And here's why. Maverick, and the other woman I often say this about is Norma Dumont, where Maverick presents as a striker. Norma Dumont has herself announced as a Sanda practitioner. She stands like a Sanda practitioner, but as soon as the bullets start flying, you can tell that she wants to clinch and wrestle. It's her instinct. Maverick is the same. Maverick is a Muay Thai fighter. She throws Muay Thai style kicks. She stands like a Muay Thai fighter, but once the bullets start flying, like her safe place, just whatever it is in her mind, like she ends up wanting to clinch and wrestle and have like her hands and like be on the other woman. Maybe it's a reaction to always being the shorter fighter. I don't know what it is, but if she does that is handing Jasudavicius pretty much the only way, or at least the easiest way she can win this fight. Jasudavicius is a much larger woman who's a very good wrestler. Because of that, if Maverick wins this fight, she's going to have to strike from outside with someone who is slower. Like Jasudavicius is, has slower hand and foot speed. Her footwork is not as good. Maverick can win an out striking battle with Jasudavicius. If she picks her spots, she probably can clinch and do damage there. But I'm actually not seeing that as the main chance here. I didn't think it was going to be this big an upset when I sort of started digging into it, but I have Jasudavicius to win a decision here. I don't trust Maverick to fight as disciplined a fight as she's going to need to win 2 rounds out of 3 against Jasudavicius. Give me Maverick to probably run into clinch exchanges where she's getting smothered by the taller woman. Jasudavicius probably getting Maverick down on the ground and being able to set up shop there. Again, stay busy enough, do enough damage to keep from being stood up, and therefore prevent Maverick from doing the things that would win her the fight, namely kicking Jasudavicius from range. So give me Jasudavicius by decision in a pretty big upset.
Yeah, I like that pick. I think the odds are way off too. I agree. I understand why Maverick is the favorite, but if you told me, if you asked me to set the line, I would have put her at like -140, like not as massive a favorite as she is. So I agree with you there. The thing I'll say about Maverick, you talked about her as this, prospect where you're high on, and now you might not be as high anymore. One thing I'll say is she's still only 25. Like she's still really young. And she, when she was fighting in the UFC, she was like getting her master's degree and all this.
Yeah.
So she's done with that. So I wouldn't be surprised if she makes huge jumps and improvements. So I still think she's a strong prospect in a budding division. She's very athletic, southpaw with that karate style. She's a kickboxer that she keeps her chin a little too high for my liking, but she's pretty elusive. Stick and move style. She likes to get in, land some shots, and get out before you get encountered. She attacks with combinations. She was loading up a little in her last fight, so wasn't landing as clean, which I hope she fixed that. She has a karate background. She loves keeping her distance with that Holly Holm side like push kick. She can throw some naked leg kicks. And if you just look at her, I mean, she's physically strong. I mean, she's
Yes.
jacked. She gets to the clinch. You mentioned she likes to wrestle weird on her opponents. She's mean inside too. Like go back to like the Jojo fight where she bust her up, brutalized her with an elbow. Again, not the best one. I'd say she's pretty well routed. She can wrestle. She's got some good entries, some strong, very strong on top. It's almost elite, I'd say. Like she gets that Dagestani handcuff. She really stresses position and then doing the damage, then going for the submission. She beat up a good grappler in Jillian Robinson in big exchanges, though I think Erin Blanchfield showed that she still has some huge room for growth as Blanchfield smoked her on the ground. It wasn't a competitive fight at all. But if she's on top, she has some good mean ground and pound. She has some slicks back takes against Sabina Mazo. She is a submission threat. She has 5 subs. Though she will lose position to chase a submission. Another thing is she's been taken down. Like a lot of females have taken her down, and she gassed a little bit. Like I thought she beat Barber, but she also gassed out late. Jasudavicius, massive flyweight, long, lengthy, physically strong, fights at a high pace, but doesn't like being pushed back herself. She wants to be the one pushing their opponent back. Works behind a jab, stands tall, making herself a big target, and she has been hurt to the body because of how high she stands up. But when she gets to the clinch, I mean, she just like pressures. She uses her height really well to land knees and batter her opponent. And she's getting there because she wants to eventually get the fight to the ground. Body lock takedowns, trip takedowns. Got very, very heavy top game. Some mean ground and pound. The one concern on the ground, she only has one submission. Jasudavicius, she has like I see what you're seeing. Like she has all the physical tools. I mean, she's super strong. I was on the fence, Maverick is tough because one fight you're scratching your head and you're like, man, I thought she was better than this, and then other fights she looks spectacular, and you're like, oh yeah, she's a future star. Jasudavicius is one of these ones where she's going to grind out. She puts herself in position to win matches that she's not a better fighter than the person because she sticks to her game plan. And obviously her game plan is going to be close the distance against Miranda Maverick, try to get her down. And I think she's going to have some success there. But if Maverick can keep it on the feet, I think she hits harder. She's definitely the more complete kicking game. I think she's the better, even though Jasudavicius will try to get the fight to the ground. And if it does hit the ground, I actually think it might be Jasudavicius on top. I actually think Miranda Maverick's a better wrestler. If she keeps in the mind, I'm going to wrestle instead of trying to strike with her. She's a bull on top. I'm with you. Like this is super close. Like I keep going back to that age of Maverick and saying, we're judging her on being a part-time fighter at 23, the athleticism, the speed. Like if someone blows the other one out, it's Maverick. Yeah. If we get a 10-8 round, it's Maverick. If we get a split decision where we're debating the decision, that's the fight Jasudavicius wins. I'm saying obviously Maverick can win that one too, but you get what I'm saying. Like, yeah, Jasudavicius doesn't blow the dolls off her. So because of that, I'm still going to go with the upside. But I'm with you, man. Like if I'm betting, I'm betting at Jasudavicius. Getting that kind of like odds on a fight that I think really should be a pick'em because of Jasudavicius' style. So I'll take Maverick. I'll say with not much confidence. So I'll take Maverick by split decision.
All right, we have our first little bit of disagreement. Next up at UFC 289, and at least as the card is currently constituted, the top prelim is a middleweight matchup between Nassourdine Imavov and Chris Curtis. Imavov, the 28-year-old Russian by way of France, is 12-4 overall. He is 4-2 in the UFC. He is coming off of a loss. He fought back in January in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 217, dropping a unanimous decision across 5 rounds to Sean Strickland. Prior to that, he had won 3 straight over Ian Heinisch, Edmund Shabazian, and Joaquin Buckley. So he will look to get things back on track against Curtis, who is looking to regain his positive momentum as well. The 35-year-old Ohio native is 30-10 overall. He is also 4-2 in the UFC. He most recently fought at UFC 287 back in April, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Kelvin Gastelum. Prior to that, he had knocked out Joaquin Buckley in the second round at UFC 282 last December. Odds here, find Imavov a slight to moderate favorite. He's out there around minus 145 or so. Curtis available at plus 120. Keith, who you got in this one, and how do you see this one playing out?
I think it's gonna be a great fight. I think this is one of the best fights on the card, obviously from ranking sense, but also stylistically. Obviously, Imavov lost a little bit of shine losing to Strickland, especially taking on Strickland, who was coming in on short notice. Like really short notice. We previewed the Gastelum fight, but he's still a good athlete. He's elusive. He moves well. The problem in that fight, and I think you can give him a little bit. Like I don't want to give him a pass all the way, but you can give him a little bit of pass. That it's never good to be the guy who's booked for the fight, and you're taking on a guy who's taking the fight on short notice. It's like it always still looks worse for you because you should be the one to win. But there is some truth to it that, he only got 3-4 days to prepare for fight, but I only had 3-4 days to prepare for him. So I think there is some truth to that. Like, and especially if the guy's style is much different.
And the guy stepping in on short notice, he may have even been ranked higher.
Yeah, he's way better than Gastelum coming off a long layoff and everything. Yeah. He's a pretty poised striker. He's a counter striker. He keeps his hands low, but his hands are fast. Nice snap on his punches. I love his step back fade right hand that he does. He's got some plus power. I mean, we've seen him smash some good guys, Phil Hawes, Ian Heinisch. Like you hear both those guys. He's a solid wrestler, and I actually think he needs to wrestle some more. When he commits to his wrestling, he's pretty relentless. He chains attempts together well, which is something I think he needs to go to and wrestle more. A strong top game. He got some mean grind and pound. We saw him beat up Ian Heinisch from on top. He beat up Edmund Shabazian. Beat up Shabazian bad from on top. He has a submission threat. He showed some improved takedown defense against Ian Heinisch, but a big concern I have, and I think a lot of people have been saying this, is after his last fight, excuse me, against Strickland, he slowed down in that fight, and the pressure got to him, and he slowed down in other fights, and that's concerning, especially against a guy like Chris Curtis. Curtis ain't gonna slow down. Curtis is an undersized middleweight. He's a southpaw with some crisp boxing. He's also a counter striker, but he's a pressure counter striker. He likes to move forward, trying to get into the pocket, wait for you to unload, slides by something, and then he lands some tight, clean boxing. He likes a lot of hooks, a lot of uppercuts. He's one of the best body workers in the game. Like we saw that against Oliveira, where he was just digging that left hook to the body. I have my notes, underrated power. I don't know if that's the case anymore. He's knocked out some good guys so far in the UFC, hurt some really good guys. He did struggle, but probably his worst showing was probably that Jack Hermanson fight, where he struggled to cut off the cage. Hermanson's movement was a little too much for him. He sometimes cannot match his opponent's output too and give away rounds. He did this against Kelvin Gastelum. He gave away a round. I know there's some controversy with the headbutt and everything, and I think there's some truth to that. But joking Buckley, even though he knocked out Buckley in the first round, he kind of gave away by just simply not matching his output. And some of that could be looking for reads and stuff. I mean, with other guys who've been historically slow starters, like John Jones and Anderson Silva. Another thing he has going for him is he has such a boxing style that the optics aren't good. And what I mean by that is one thing he likes to do is he likes to roll with punches. So it's hitting your hands, it's hitting you a little bit. So it never really looks good. So it makes it almost look like you're losing. Now he can wrestle, but he hardly ever looks for takedowns. Almost never offensive wrestler, but I've seen him, and he's got some good top game. He shows some really good takedown defense against Oliveira, and he has the cardio to go all 15 minutes because once his output is usually not the best, but also like he doesn't. Even his punches when he's throwing like the hooks, they're not looping, they're not really over exaggerated. So the line is really close, and I get that. I like both guys. I mean, they're both ranked fighters. The big surprise to me is why is this fight on the prelims? Like it should be over Andre Barriault and Eryk Anders. It should be over Malott and Fugitt.
It should be over Ige and Landwehr.
It probably should be third from the top. I mean, Imavov's last fight was in the main event. So, and now he's, the prelims of not the best pay-per-view. I think this is a tough one. I am going Imavov. He's bigger, he's longer, he's faster. He has more tools. Like he uses more of his limbs, bigger kicking game, more knees. He's the better offensive wrestler. Well, I don't know if he's a better straight wrestler, but he's a guy who will look to wrestle more, I should say. Curtis is going to need to get in the pocket. He's going to need to unload. He's going to need to cut off the cage. He's getting past his jab, which is going to be a hard thing to do with someone like him who moves and then jabs. I think this fight, he looks a lot like the Hermanson Curtis fight, where Curtis is struggling to get in the inside and Imavov's landing from distance. Though a big concern I have, if Imavov slows down, Curtis has the power to put him out, especially, late second, early third round. Curtis could catch him, but I'm going to go with Imavov. I'm going to say he wins by decision.
I feel basically identically about this fight as you do. Imavov's gas tank is a concern, but for me, it's mostly a concern when I'm considering whether he is a future title contender at 185. It was disturbing to watch him lose the fight to Strickland the way he did, because it was his first 5-round fight in the UFC, and it may have been his first 5-round fight period, but also he didn't have to make his full weight cut. He was allowed to, he weighed in at like 195 or something for that. Once Strickland stepped in, they were just like, don't bother, make him 185.
That's a good point.
And he's still gassed out.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And he gassed out against a guy in Strickland that, I mean, it was a pretty high-paced fight, but it wasn't this withering pace. It was
steady. It was steady. It wasn't a sprint, but it was like a guy who runs a 5K, but he's like leading the pack of the 5K. Like he's still jogging, but he's moving too.
That's a good way of putting it. If Imavov's gas tank abandons him, if it abandons him early enough, Curtis is super dangerous and can absolutely put him away, and is a poised veteran that you mentioned that a lot of times Curtis will cost himself by not throwing sufficient volume. But having said that, when he sees an opportunity, he's very good at recognizing when his opponent's hurt, putting the screws to him and not letting them get away. So that's absolutely possible. I'm picking Imavov by decision here, but my second most likely outcome would be Curtis by decision, where he wins the second and third rounds. Third most likely would be Curtis by a third round stoppage. But I'm with you. I'm going with the slight favorite here, Imavov, and by the middle of the second round, I think we'll know whether we were right or not.
Yeah. I think that's a good point about. Yeah, Curtis can give away rounds, but then I think you're right. Like he's opportunistic. I think that's a good point.
The 5-fight main card of UFC 289 opens up with a middleweight matchup between Marc-Andre Barriault and Eryk Anders. Barriault, the 33-year-old Canadian, is 15-6 with 1 no contest overall. He is 4-6 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC as a former middleweight and light heavyweight champ in Canada's TKO promotion. He won his last time out. It was at UFC 285 back in March, where he got a second-round TKO of Julian Marquez. He will look to make it 2 in a row against Anders, who is also looking for his second win in a row. The 36-year-old American is 15-7 with 1 no contest overall. He is an even 7-7 with 1 no contest in the UFC. His most recent outing was back in December at UFC on ESPN, Thompson versus Holland, where he knocked out Kyle Dawkins in the second round. That allowed him to bounce back from back-to-back losses to Andre Muniz and Junyoung Park. Odds here favor the man from Quebec. He is minus 150, Anders plus 120 or so on the comeback. Keith, I don't know if you knew this, but Eryk Anders used to play football, American football. American rules football. He played, for a well-known university with a strong program that wins national titles from time to time.
Oh, Boston College?
Yes, Boston. Boston College wins hockey titles from time to time. And that's about as relevant as saying that 36-year-old Eryk Anders used to play linebacker for Alabama. According to most people's expectations, he's probably underperformed a little bit in the UFC, whereas Marc-Andre Barriault could very easily have been cut back in 2019 on the tail end of his third straight loss. And since then, he's actually kind of turned the corner and been pretty solid. Who wins this one? Are these guys on the two escalators passing each other? I'm trying to make this sound interesting.
Yeah. How's Barriault as a linebacker? Like how would he do?
I expect he'd do pretty good. I mean, he's probably slow, actually. He strikes me as a guy that's not a fast runner. No,
he's probably good at curling, though. Like, he's probably got that. Like, he's definitely one of those sweepers. Like, he's sweeping like crazy.
I'm trying to drum up some interest in this thing because this is a rocky way to open up the card. You pointed out that the Imavov versus Curtis fight that precedes this one and tops the prelims is a much better fight in the same division and is more likely to be exciting. But I mean, tell me how you think this one plays out.
Barriault fights pretty excitingly. It's Anders that can be, low output, plodding, slower. He's a southpaw. But in fairness, his output was much better against Kyle Dawkins. Now, he throws a lot of the same combination, just kind of winging an overhand left. And I definitely think his power is greatly exaggerated. And it has a lot to do with him being a football player 15 years ago. This huge power. And it's like, well, not really. He doesn't knock that many people out. But it finished, again, he did knock out Kyle Dawkins. But I feel, and tell me if you agree with this, I feel like that says more about Dawkins right now. Like, Dawkins looks shot than Anders being this, suddenly a knockout artist.
I agree. And even so, it's not like he sent him to, the astral plane with one punch.
Yeah. It wasn't a Mark McGuire triple deck at the Sky Dome. It was, one that just got over the fence at the Little League field. He's very hittable. He's been cracked a lot. I mean, I go back to like the Thiago Santos fight where he took oh my God, the amount of damage he took in that fight. Plus, I mean, we talk about him being a football player and saying it's irrelevant, but the damage he's taken in football isn't, just not getting controversial with CTE and all that stuff, but also just tackles, landing on your elbow, landing on your shoulder, landing on, everybody who's played football has had at least some kind of surgery on something.
And I mean, it's not controversial to say that CTE is a thing. And it's not like Anders woke up at age 19 and was like, I want to play football for Alabama. He was a highly touted prospect who'd been playing in pads and a helmet since the time he was 13.
Absolutely.
Like, if anything, he's probably just crossed over to the point where he's taken more damage, quote unquote, in MMA than in football.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing we don't talk about Anders, like we talk about like his strike, and I say we, I mean the UFC broadcast, is he's an underrated grappler. Like, he gets a lot of takedowns. He likes to get in close, like grab like a snatch single. He's got some strong takedown defense because he's got such a wide base. Though he was subbed by Andre Muniz, but I think that says more about Muniz than Anders. Marc-Andre Barriault, he's a high pressure fighter. He fights with volume, can fight out of both stances. He's constantly pressing the action on his foe. He throws hard. He has nice power. He unloads combos when he gets in the pocket. his straight right is his best blow. It's funny because they won't talk about Barriault's power like they'll talk about Anders, but I actually think he's the harder hitter of the two. He throws some hard calf kicks. He wants to be pressing forward though. Like pressure has got to him. Like Anthony Hernandez pressure got to him, and that's what Anthony Hernandez. I mean, we're on the Anthony Hernandez bandwagon, especially. Yeah. I know I am at least. He has some defensive holes. He pillars when striking. He will shoot a takedown, but he's definitely not a strong wrestler. But he showed some solid takedown defense against Jaco. But he couldn't stop the wrestling of Anthony Hernandez. But again, Hernandez is a stud. And he couldn't get off the bottom. But cardio is a good thing. Like, even though he presses a really hard pace, he can fight hard all 15 minutes. I haven't got excited for an Anders fight in a really long time. Barriault, on the other hand, he isn't as talented, I'd say, as Anders, but he puts himself in a position to win due to his that nonstop press and action. Barriault's going to have to need to avoid some power shots from Anders. He's going to need to avoid the clinch. He's going to need to avoid some takedowns. Hopefully get into that mid-range and have a mid-range boxing battle. I think we both, I think we get a little bit of back and forth between both guys getting hurt. But I'm going to go, you said Anders is, no, who did you say was a slight favorite?
Barriault is minus 150 or so. Anders around plus 120.
Oh, wow. I thought this was pretty much be a pick 'em. I'm sorry about that. I mean, usually when you're giving the rundown, I'm still organizing my notes a little bit.
You're still looking at Diana Belbita's.
Yeah. All right, you got me there. I'm gonna go with Barriault due to his volume. Give me Barriault by decision.
Yeah, I wish there were more disagreement here, just to kind of spice things up for our friends, but whatever corner it is that Barriault turned in about 3 years ago at this point, like after the no contest against Piahoda, he shows the same basic skills. He takes the same basic approach, but it's just panned out a lot better for him. And it's not like he's taken a step away in competition. He's still fighting the same kind of basic, not ranked, but solid middleweights. But all of a sudden, he's more of a finisher. I guess he fights with a greater sense of urgency is all I can say. And I hate citing intangibles as the reason the fighter got better. Because again, usually the better fighter wins regardless of who was hungrier or who who loves their kids more. If you're watching Dana White's Contender Series, they're all like, I'm fighting for my daughter or whatever. But he's just all of a sudden taking the same basic approach, same basic skill set, same basic physicality, and started beating pretty good middleweights. You can't say that about Anders. I feel as though Anders winning or losing is still just very much subject to who his opponent is that night. The last time Anders really surprised me by winning a fight, probably Gerald Meerschaert a couple of years ago. Like, I figured Anders would make a mistake and Meerschaert would get a guillotine on him somewhere in the middle of the fight, and he actually fought a really focused fight and beat Meerschaert. That's the last time Anders really surprised me. Other than that, I feel as though I've been pretty good at picking his fights for the last few years, and here I'm picking Barriault to win. The longer the fight goes, I think it favors Barriault, just as the fighter with the better gas tank who is less mistake prone. And regardless of what the UFC booth is going to tell you, Anders isn't a threat to finish this with one punch at any moment. So yeah, I think the general dynamic of this fight favors Barriault. Give me Barriault to win a decision here, and I just hope it's fun.
If you beat Eryk Anders, you should get like Alabama, like one of those honorary degrees from them. Like if someone speaks and they get like an honorary, like you beat Anders, there you go.
I don't even know if Anders has a degree from Alabama. I don't know if he stayed and graduated. So that'd be a bummer if all those people were getting like honorary degrees off of him and he doesn't have one.
I know he was he like, I know like he played and I know he started and everything, but was he like NFL like draft or anything like that?
No,
would he have like he wouldn't have had a reason to leave early.
No, like he probably did go all 4 years, but that doesn't guarantee he graduated.
No,
I mean, I spent like I spent 6 years in college and didn't graduate, so
yeah.
I laugh, but it's sad. All right.
Yeah, we're dissing him, and we'll find out he has like 7 degrees or something. He's got a doctorate or something.
The UFC 289 main card powers on with a featherweight matchup between Dan Ige and Nate Landwehr. Ige, the 31-year-old Hawaiian by way of Las Vegas, is 16-6 overall. He is 8-5 since joining the UFC out of the very first season of Dana White's Contender Series. He did win his last time out. Fought most recently at the Strickland versus Imavov card back in January, in fact, and did his part to depopulate Texas by flatlining Damon Jackson in the second round. Prior to that, Ige had lost 3 straight, though in his defense, those were against Chan Sung Jung, Josh Emmett, and Movsar Evloev. So he's looking to keep the good vibes going at the expense of Landwehr. The 34-year-old Tennessee native is 17-4 overall. He's 4-2 since joining the UFC as a former M1 global featherweight champ. He is on a 3-fight win streak. Since getting knocked out in like a minute by Julian Erosa back in February of 2021, he has a submission of Ludovic Klein, a decision win over David Onama, and a second round submission of Austin Lingo. The most recent of those, the Lingo fight, was at the Vera versus Sandhagen card back in March. So he's looking to make it an improbable 4 straight for a guy that came into the UFC with relatively modest expectations, and he is not favored to get it done. Ige is a massive favorite, minus 260, Landwehr plus 220. I feel as though I feel bad calling Dan Ige a gatekeeper. No, I mean, no fighter likes to be called that. They, because every fighter, with the exception of a very few oddball exceptions, think of themselves as a future champ, whether it's their first fight in the UFC. I mean, listen to Amir Albazi after getting a sketchy decision last weekend against Kai Kara France. He's like, I know I'm ready for, the title. It's like, dude, we're not even sure you were ready for Kai Kara France. But
my point, how about Nemov gets a win out of the weight class, first UFC win, he calls off Volkanovski.
He calls off maybe the best fighter in the sport.
Yeah.
You do you, man. But also, speaking of Alexander Volkanovski, you don't think Max Holloway is just thinks he would beat Volkanovski if he got a 4th try? Of course he does. Everybody thinks that they're a future champ. Nobody thinks they're the gatekeeper. So I always hesitate to call people that, but Ige is the perfect example. He is 8-5 in the UFC, and aside from a weird loss in his UFC debut, he's lost to Calvin Kattar, Chan Sung Jung, Josh Emmett, and Movsar Evloev. All top 10 fighters.
Yeah.
And either top 5 fighters holding steady or top 10 fighters who were on their way up at the time.
Yeah.
Everyone else, he's handled. And has some really good wins in there. I think he's the perfect gatekeeper to the featherweight top 10. His limitations as a striker have been exposed against classier strikers. Like Calvin Kattar really, really put it on him. Just a better boxer, with good reach. Ige was frustrated all night. Landwehr? I mean, I understand. Like, I like the Nate Landwehr story. He is a guy that he's kind of one of our guys because he's kind of like a country fried Darren Elkins, and Elkins is already pretty country fried. But where Elkins gets beat up and usually comes back with like his wrestling and grappling, Landwehr comes back with surprisingly good single shot power in his punches, or he is capable of wrestling and then beating people up from top position. But that's kind of his thing. I think that's rough sledding against Ige, who is a surprisingly good wrestler against people below the Calvin Kattar level. I think he's an excellent kickboxer, good power. I think is in a promotion where almost everyone's power is overstated. I think Ige's power is a little understated. When he hits people clean, you can tell they really feel it. I mean, Landwehr's best chance here is to get beat up for a round and a half, hope Ige starts to get tired, get frustrated, or make mistakes. And I just don't see that happening. Ige hasn't really lost any fights he's supposed to win in the UFC since the Julio Arce fight all the way back in his debut. And here I think he's just going to be way too much for Landwehr. Given that Landwehr can be hurt at this point, I mean, he's 34. He's got a lot of fights under his belt. He's been hit clean a lot. I'm going to say that Ige gets him out of there. Give me Dan Ige by second round knockout here.
Yeah, wow. It's funny talking about Dan Ige. Yeah, I agree with him. Like, I also hate using the word gatekeeper just because it has so many meanings. Like, is a gatekeeper to get into UFC? Is a gatekeeper get top, 10, or is a gatekeeper to the title? So I'm also, I try to stay away from that a little bit. But I've kind of forgot about Dan Ige because he's been so inactive lately, which is funny because he was the opposite when he first showed up in the UFC. He was always fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And lately, I mean, I know it's been injuries and different things. But I thought he was so much older than he is. He's only 31.
Yep.
So he's still at his prime, based on age. Now he's taking a lot of damage. I go back to like the fights like Edson Barbosa, Calvin Kattar, Chan Sung Jung, Josh Emmett, most of Evloev. Those are the guys he's lost to. He took a lot of damage in those fights. So he's an older 31.
Yeah.
But he's still good. I mean, he presses the action, got really good volume. He's got accurate punching, throws combinations, loves getting into the pocket and unloading some big shots. He likes to counter. He has this like counter right hand, left hook combination that he loves. He got the knockout of David Jackson, but he was setting it up with some big body shots, working the body. I mean, he throws heat, whips his shots. I agree with you. He's got good power. I mean, David Jackson was on a nice little run, and he knocked him out beautifully. He has the cardio to go hard all 15 minutes. I forgot to mention he's got some strong leg kicks. He loves throwing a flying knee to close the distance. When I think of wrestlers, I don't think of Danny Ige, but he's a sneaky wrestler. He's more of like a Jeremy Kennedy and Bellator type guy, where he's not the like credential wrestler, but he finds a way to get good guys down. Good timing on his entries. When the opponent, opens up on their power shots, he's dropping on the legs. And then he's a good overall just grappler, good top control, good ground and pound, BJJ black belt. Landwehr, I like the Darren Elkins. I do agree he fights differently, and his tools are different than Darren Elkins. But I think I like the comparison where it's pressure striking with insane output, just marches forward constantly on the gas, throws a stiff jab, hard teep kicks, quick high kick, good hard calf kicks. But he has this like reckless abandon where he doesn't care about getting hit back. I mean, I go back to when he fought Darren Elkins himself and he was squaring up and they were getting tagged by Darren Elkins. He can wrestle though. He can clinch battle. Showed very good takedown defense against Darren Elkins. And when he's been taken out, he pops right back up. Good sub defense if you hold him down. This is a really fun fight. Like, I love Nate Landwehr's attitude. He's a lot of fun when he wins, gets on the mic. He's a lot of fun. I think this fight was going to live up to it. I expect a war. Landwehr always comes to battle, but Ige is definitely technically more sound, and he's very intelligent. I think Landwehr's style is tailor-made for an opportunistic fighter like Ige. I see Landwehr just walking into a big shot or walking into takedowns where he's over pursuing and Ige is just dropping down, getting like grabbing a single, running the pipe or something. I'm going to go with the former. I'm going to say Ige catches him with a big shot. I'm going to say Ige puts him out in the second round.
I mean, so we both have Ige by second round KO here, but safe to say that if Landwehr pulls out some sort of third round finish, he's probably picking up the coveted F-word middle name on the recap that night.
Yeah, he could. He could.
Joining, Paul Craig and Darren Elkins in the club. Dude, what is Paul Craig doing dropping the middleweight?
He almost looks like he should go up to heavyweight. He should go the other direction.
Yeah, he's huge. He's third from the top at UFC 289 is a welterweight matchup between Mike Malott and Adam Fugitt. Malott, the 31-year-old Haligonian, is 9-1-1 overall. He is 2-0 since joining the UFC out of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought last April, knocking out Mickey Gall in the first round, came back this February at UFC Fight Night Muniz versus Allen, and choked out Johan Lainez also in the first round. So Canada's top prospect looking to keep his momentum going, and standing in his way will be Fugitt. The 34-year-old Oregonian is 9-3 overall. He is 1-1 in the UFC, though in his defense, his debut was last July in a short notice step-up matchup against Michael Morales. He made it all the way to the 3rd round before getting TKO'd. He came back this February for his first proper UFC fight and knocked out Yusako Kinoshita in the first round at UFC Fight Night Lewis versus Spivak. Odds here do favor the Canadian pretty heavily. He's -210, Fugitt +170. Keith, one, can you believe that Mike Malott used to fight at featherweight? It is ridiculous. 2, who you got winning this fight?
Yeah, no, I'm surprised about that. Yes, and I'll tell you, I'm winning in around about 2 minutes. I'm really surprised that this fight is third from the top. I know we keep saying it over and over again, and I understand, trying to make the stadium happy, the arena happy with the Canadian, but you know what would make them even more happy? Like putting on a really good quality fight between 2 top fighters. Like you could find the entire arena, other than Mike Malott's section, say, hey, who would you rather see, Mike Malott versus Adam Fugitt or the Korean Zombie versus Max Holloway? Is anybody saying, I want to see Mike Malott versus Adam Fugitt? And I'm not trying to dog these guys. Like, this fight should be on the prelims, the early prelims.
Yeah.
And also, like, even if there is reaction, if you're in Tajikistan and you got the Tajikistan fighter on the main card and they're like crazy happy about it, cool. But don't forget about the rest of the world who's also watching, Anyways, back to this fight. Even though I kind of almost like I was jabbing these guys a little bit, Mike Malott looked great in his last fight. So he's a very good athlete. He moves well. It's funny. He moves his feet well, though he doesn't move his head well. He doesn't slip as much. He's been cracked in the past, but he works behind a jab. I love that he double jabs. So we don't. I mean, Kai France was doing it last night really well, but in the 5th round, good pop. Though sometimes he can overthrow, leave himself a little off balance. He's an underrated wrestler. Like definitely wouldn't call him a wrestler, but I mean, he trains with Team Alpha Male. Same, you're training with, good wrestlers, in and out of that gym. And he's a big time grappler. He's got 5 submissions. I mean, you see how great he looked in the submissions in his last fight. And obviously he's got that Team Alpha Male guillotine down. Fugitt, southpaw, also likes to press the action, though he does drop his hands a little bit. Constantly taking ground, staying busy by constantly throwing. When he sees an opening, he throws hard. Has some pop, a lot of kicks, loves teep kicks, blends attempts, takedown attempts with the striking well. He also reaches for takedowns, but he isn't a great wrestler. Like he wants to get the fight to the ground, but he kind of struggles to get there. He has 3 submissions. Fugitt is a guy that he works hard and he puts himself in a position to win due to his toughness, kind of like a Jasmine Jasudavicius that we talked about on the prelims, where a limited athlete, but they put themselves in the best position to win. But I think Malott is just way more polished. I think he's a better striker. I actually think he's the better grappler. I think he's just better everywhere. I think he connects in a big shot, and I think he locks in a submission. I think we kind of have like a club and sub style. I'm gonna say Malott rocks that crowd, and I said he's the very first round. Give me Malott by first round submission.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned the thing about featherweight Malott is ahead of his fight on the Contender Series a couple of years ago, when all the bouts were announced, the UFC usually, or the company usually announces the whole slate. I was like, man, I wonder if Mike Malott is any relation to that guy that fought Hakeem Dawodu back in World Series of Fighting. And then I go look, I'm like, oh, it's the same guy. Yeah, He was very young. Like he and Dawodu were both young, both undefeated at the time. And yeah, he's sort of come out of nowhere to be a mildly intriguing prospect. You mentioned it. His submission game, like his grappling is definitely his most it's definitely his best individual skill, and it's impressive just how venomous and what a quick strike submission game it is. Like obviously he destroyed Johan Lainez. He guillotined a not super high level guy on the Contender Series to get into the UFC, but even in his last fight before the Contender Series, he choked out Solomon Renfro in like a minute and a half. Solomon Renfro is a really good fighter who is, I mean, he'll probably be in the UFC within the next 12 to 18 months. He lost on the Contender Series, I think, a year or two ago, but he was really young. It was a split decision. Renfro's a really good fighter, and Malott ran right through him. All of that spells bad news for Fugitt, because you said it. He's a tough game guy who's decent everywhere and has proven himself adept at putting himself in the best position to win his fights. But a lot of it involves him having to kind of weather his opponent's offense to get there. And I just don't think he does that against Malott. I think Malott hurts him on the feet, hustles him to the ground, and finds something nasty in the first round. I have Malott by first round submission as well here. With that, we come to the co-main event of UFC 289, a lightweight matchup between Charles the Bronx Oliveira and Beneil Dariush. Oliveira, the 33-year-old Brazilian, is 33-9 with one no contest overall. He is 21-9 with one no contest in the UFC. He is, of course, your former lightweight champ. He fought most recently last October at UFC 280, where he surrendered his title to Islam Makhachev by second round submission. Prior to that, he had won 10 straight fights in one of the toughest divisions in the sport to pull off such a feat. Leading into the Makhachev fight, his wins over Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, 5 of those by finish. One of the most incredible runs in the history of the sport. All that momentum blunted, obviously, in the demoralizing outing against Makhachev. He's out to prove that he is still in the title picture, out to earn a shot at perhaps winning his gold back. And standing in his way will be Dariush. The 34-year-old American is 22-4-1 overall. He is 16-4-1 in the UFC. He is on an 8-fight win streak of his own, making him the owner of one of the longest win streaks in the UFC without having earned a title shot. He fought most recently at that same UFC 280 card back last October, where he took a unanimous decision over Mateusz Gamrot. And that brings him into our co-main event here. Keith, who's the favorite? Okay, the favorite is minus 135. The underdog is plus 110.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's about exactly how the line probably should be. Maybe even closer. The favorite, I go Oliveira.
The favorite is Beneil Dariush.
Oh, that's why I'm not a bookie.
Having said that, tell me how you see this fight playing out, other than awesomely.
Yeah, this is a fantastic fight. This is the best fight on the card. I mean, I don't know anybody who's, when they were announcing this card, is there a single person watching this card, watching our preview, that likes a fight better than this one on the card? Like, it's specifically the main event. Is anybody more excited for Nunes versus Aldana? And I'm not trying to bash that fight. Like,
but this is, I mean, the odds will tell you that this is a harder fight to call. And you know what? Because Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje have already fought once before, this is on paper the fight I'm most excited for in 2023.
Really?
I mean, obviously there's more stuff to come down the pike, but yeah.
Moving forward, you say, right?
Yeah.
I Volkanovski versus Makhachev, I was super excited for, because I'm the biggest. I'm a Volkanovski guy.
Yeah.
I'm always in awe of what that guy can do. But yeah, this fight is as good as, like, if I was coming up with a top 10 list fights for the year, this one's on it. The one thing that I hate about this fight is why isn't this fight 5 rounds? It's only a
Es-
3-round fight.
That is unfortunate,
Yeah.
especially because Oliveira is coming in off of, I mean, he didn't need all 5 rounds, but he's coming in off of several 5-round fights in a row. And presumably whoever wins this is going to be in a 5-round fight next.
Yeah, I mean, they just did it with Bilal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns. They made that a 5-round fight.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why isn't this one? And like just let's just make it a rule. Like, if you have 2 fighters in the top 5, they should be a 5-round fight. Just make that a rule. You know, whether main event, co-main event, I don't care if it's prelims. If you have 2 fighters in the top 5, they should be in a division. They should be in a 5-round fight. Anyways, let's get to the actual action. I'll start with the former champion Charles Oliveira. He's a great athlete. He really is. High volume, pressure kickboxer with long, lengthy strikes. So deceiving is his power. Now, I think a lot of people talk about how hard he hits, but it wasn't always the narrative. And the reason why, he doesn't really load up. I mean, just tags clean, short shots, and he hurts guys. And he's very accurate. Good jab. His straight right is dangerous. He's got those powerful hooks. I mean, his left hook has dropped a lot of people. He also uses his check hook as a power punch, which a lot of guys don't do. Like, he's trying to hurt you with it. I love his stepping knees, which he throws because he doesn't care if someone catches them and takes it down. Now that might not be the case in this fight against Beneil Dariush, but I mean, I'm just talking about generally speaking, and just mean kicks everywhere. I mean, he beat up Justin Gaethje with teep kicks up the middle. He has defensive issues. He always has. Due to his very Muay Thai style, he's a very stationary target, standing tall right in front of his opponent. He's been hurt bad in so many fights, but he has one. I mean, we've talked about this. He has historic ability to recover and not give up, which was not always the case. Which is kind of ironic because when he got hurt against Makhachev and Makhachev's going for submission, you kind of said, okay, this is where Charles Oliveira gets hurt and he survives, and that wasn't the case. Now, he's also open to leg kicks, because he stands up tall, kickboxer, but he's got a strong clinch game. So, like, we think about him, his overall submission threat, which is the greatest in UFC history. I mean, he's the most submissions in UFC history, but he doesn't get enough credit for just how good of a wrestler is. He gets in the clinch and he gets inside, body locks, judo throws, foot sweeps. I mean, he's really slick. Now he won't fight off takedown attempts himself, which is crazy that he's just willing to go down on the ground on bottom. Mean ground and pound. Obviously, we talk about his submissions. Like, he can lock in a sub in any position, top, bottom, in scrambles, in a second. Him and Brian Ortega remind me a lot of the same, where things could be going bad or it doesn't seem like a submission, and then next thing you know, they are on a neck squeezing. He also has great sweeps. He's on bottom. Solid ground and pound. And cardio was an issue back in the day when he was featherweight at 155. Obviously if he makes 155 was always been an issue, but cardio is there. Like, he can go hard, and he's got really good experience, to big fight experience. Beneil Dariush, southpaw, who's also very aggressive on the feet, high volume. It's a controlled volume. And his power, I just talked about Charles Oliveira's power. Beneil Dariush's power just showed up like unannounced one day, and you're like, whoa, holy shit, Beneil Dariush is starching guys. And that wasn't never his game. He wings this powerful overhand left, just cracking dudes, mean kicks to the body. I love his high kick, from the southpaw stance, the orthodox fighter. I love his stepping knees. I mean, he beat up Mateusz Gamrot with knees up the middle. He's still very hittable. He keeps his chin a little high in the air. He's open to leg kicks due to having like very long, deceivingly long legs. He's been knocked out himself. I mean, I think it's been a while, but like Alexander Hernandez knocked him out, and there's been some couple other knockouts in there. But the thing that I think of when I think of Beneil Dariush, besides his elite grappling, is just we think of big guys in the division, Beneil Dariush is not the first guy you think of, but he is. He's huge and he's physically strong.
Yes.
I like, you think of like someone like Justin Gaethje. He's a big dude, strong. Dustin Poirier, extremely strong, like historically strong, huge. When I met Dustin Poirier a couple times in person, he looks like a light heavyweight. He's huge. Like, you put him in a squat rack. I'm betting on Beneil Dariush.
Mm-hmm.
He loves that close grinding, slapping titties in the clinch affair. And I go back to like Scott Holtzman fight. He batted him inside in there, and he's a really good wrestler. He showed phenomenal takedown defense against Mateusz Gamrot, who's a really good wrestler, grappler himself. And Dariush's grappling is elite. You're talking about multi-time no-gi world champion. We can talk about Oliveira being the greatest submission artist in UFC history, based just statistically based on the submissions. Dariush is the more credentialed grappler in the world of BJJ.
Sure.
He's a topside grappler, some super slick back takes. I keep bringing up his, the fight against Gamrot because it was, just happened. But the scrambles him and Gamrot had were absolutely amazing. What I love about Oliveira is that Brian Ortega, very opportunistic, jump on something soon it's there. Dariush reminds me of, I want to say Damian Maia, but not. He reminds me of a Glover Teixeira.
I like that.
Where like he gets it down, and a little bit of Jailton Almeida. It's a little unfair because Jailton hasn't really reached. He's kind of the new kid on the block, but he doesn't rush it. He's so controlled when he's on top, and he obviously has 8 submission wins. This is an insane fight. I love it. I almost don't even want to pick a winner, because I don't want to disrespect these guys, because that's how much I respect both these guys' games, and I'm such a fan of both these guys.
Mm-hmm.
How can you not be? I think we have a war on our hands. I expect both guys to be landing hard shots. It's weird, both guys are really good strikers with power, but I'm almost hoping we don't get a quick knockout or something like that spectacular. I want to see some scrambles between these two. But because of that, it's not often when we get a grappling battle, but I'm going to favor Dariush in the grappling. He's which is weird. Oliveira is a huge guy, but Dariush is bigger than him. That might not be taller in this, but just generally his legs and his, his chest and his shoulders and all this. I think he's the better wrestler. I think he's the more technically sound grappler. Oliveira is willing to also put himself in bad positions to make something happen. I can see him rolling for a knee bar or stuff like that. And Dariush would just control, get the top, very Russian, Dagestani style. So I think that's going to be the difference. And the other thing side note, that wasn't my notes, is Oliveira has been in so many wars. We saw him get hurt against Makhachev in his last fight. It's not out of the possibility. We've seen this so many times where a guy's the best guy in the world and suddenly everything just falls apart. I'm not saying that's the case, and I'm really hoping it's not the case. It is in my mind a little bit like that suddenly everything goes wrong. Chuck Liddell was the best guy in the world, and 2 fights later he was kind of done, and Tony Ferguson and stuff like that. So I think Dariush is just going to win the position scrambles. Give me Dariush by decision.
Yeah, I love your breakdown there. And before I go into any of my own analysis, just a quick factual thing. I called Dariush an American during the introductions. Should have said Iranian American. He was born in Iran, and I'm pretty sure he maintains dual citizenship. And if you're ever wondering what that cool white flag is that he walks out with, that is the flag of the Assyrian diaspora. Look it up.
He's got them all covered, huh?
Yeah, he's got them all covered.
But he's really a citizen of heaven. That's what he is.
Definitely. He's
as much as I'm joking, he would love what I just said.
Oh yeah, he would love that. He wants to just ride his Tesla minivan straight to heaven. It is, and I'm going to say the same thing about the main event when we get to it next. It's hard to believe that Dariush is the older guy in this fight. Just Oliveira has been in the UFC for so long. This is his 32nd fight in the UFC.
Yeah. Can I stop you there for a second?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yes and no to that. It's looking on record. Yes, it's
Yeah.
surprising that he's older. Looking at their bodies, absolutely not.
And their hair, because Dariush has gone full. I mean, he's gone like me, like full, like salt and pepper. You know, in the last few years.
He's past touch of gray. He's past touch of gray. Like,
oh yeah. Whereas Oliveira has circumvented that by doing like the Bond villain, like hair, like bleached hair thing that all the shoot box Diego Lima guys do. Everything he said about Oliveira is dead on. And I've given my little elegy to his legendary career more than a few times on these previews. But for those who are listening to this the first time, or listening to one of our shows for the first time, or the first time since Charles Oliveira's last fight, his is probably the most unlikely championship run in modern UFC history. There's no way you could have told me, even like 6 years ago, around the time he was losing to Paul Felder and Ricardo Lamas, that this guy was a future UFC champ. I mean, he was already well on his way to being the greatest submission artist in UFC history. That was a known strength, but the rest of it, couldn't decide on a weight class, couldn't make weight in either of them. And he was a head case and a quitter. There's just no other way to put it. He has, I mean, he has a TKO loss via esophagus injury on his record, where, real talk, there's no esophagus injury. He got hit in the chest by Max Holloway and said no mas. That is put people in the sport, 7 or 8 years later. A guy that does that, because it's not just that he beat good fighters to win and defend his title. He broke unbreakable fighters. He broke Tony Ferguson. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. You broke up for a couple seconds there.
All
right. The last thing you said, like no mas, and then it went like bad for I don't know 15 seconds or so. If you just want to start over from there.
Yeah. And he basically said no mas, that he didn't want any more of that. A guy that does that isn't someone you project 8 years later ruling over maybe the best division in the sport. And it's not just that he beat great fighters to get there. He turned from a guy that got broken into a fighter that broke other people. He broke unbreakable fighters. We're talking about a guy that dominated Tony Ferguson, that finished Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler, and in each case, having to come back from adversity to do so. He didn't used to be a guy who came back from adversity. So add to the like mental transformation he's made, add to that the rounding out of his skills. He's gone from the ultimate glass cannon, a guy that was an incredible submission artist but could also be out grappled and a liability on the feet, to a guy that's, I mean, he's not as dangerous a striker as he is a submission artist. I don't want to overstate things, but he all of a sudden became a guy that there's no safe place against him. It's truly remarkable. The only comparable, and it's a very comparable arc, would be Fabricio Verdum. But Verdum did it, and he was not as extreme a case, and he did it in an easier division to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, similar idea, one-dimensional grappler who's kind of a head case all of a sudden becomes a vicious striker too and is beating the best guys in the sport.
Yeah.
That's it. And until he ran into Islam Makhachev, that's, I mean, the sky seemed to be the limit. Now, having said that, plenty of people saw him losing to Makhachev, but my question is Oliveira in decline at all? And if not, if he's the same guy that, fought Poirier, Gaethje, Makhachev, what does Dariush bring to the table that can really threaten him? And I think you kind of laid it out. For as long as this fight stays on the feet, either guy could finish this easily. They're both really hard hitters with a good diversity of offensive techniques. Like Oliveira, probably a little more diverse, but both of them can throw a variety of strikes. All of them have power, and both of them have their occasional defensive lapses on the feet. So, Dariush has been knocked out badly before. Yeah. He's also knocked out plenty of guys. If it goes to the ground, I think it's really going to hinge on the wrestling, because it's finally going to matter how they go to the ground. If Dariush tries to take down Oliveira and Oliveira just, grabs a guillotine and pulls guard, if that happens sometime in the first half of the first round, even if they get out of that round, I'm not going to feel good about Oliveira's chances. Oliveira needs to be on top here. I like your comparison of Dariush to Glover Teixeira. Just a crushingly heavy guy on top who's very deliberate. He's not stalling, he's not laying and praying, but he is securing position. He is exhausting his opponent. He's landing strikes when he has the opportunity. He's constantly looking to advance position. He is a suffocating guy when he's in top position. And as incredible as Oliveira is off his back, I don't see him threatening Dariush off of his back. I don't see him threatening him. I don't see him winning rounds off his back against Dariush, like, let alone finishing the fight that way. Like, if he ends up on bottom position and he's doing stuff like looking for leg locks, unless he's just doing it to start a scramble and get the hell out of there, I'm gonna question his game plan. I think Oliveira should probably try to damage Dariush in the clinch. He's nasty from the Muay Thai clinch. I think he shouldn't be eager to go to the ground. And if he does go to the ground, I don't think he should be conceding bottom position. I don't think Dariush is a guy that he can beat just doing regular Charles Oliveira things that have worked on some other fighters. I think Dariush is that dangerous. Aside from that, I really wish this were a 5-round fight as well. I think that would tell us a little more about both guys. If he is going to get a title fight soon, I'd love to see Dariush in another 5-round fight. As it is, just 3 rounds, I'm leaning Oliveira, and I didn't expect that I'd be calling an upset here, but give me Charles Oliveira, and I'm going to say plays it smart, manages to keep things on the feet, and hurts Dariush with kicks. Maybe start softening him up with kicks to the legs, kicks to the body, and maybe scores with something upstairs, hurts him really bad, and then finishes it with strikes on the ground. Give me Oliveira by 2nd round TKO here.
Hey, you know what? You talked about Charles Oliveira, like the turnaround. Think about this run by Dariush is on. Go back to this 3-fight skid he had. Edson Barbosa getting knocked out by flying knee, followed by a majority draw with Evan Dunham, and then get knocked out by Alexander Hernandez in 42 seconds. And go back to when he got knocked out by Alexander Hernandez, that moment, and say that guy's going to go on an 8-fight winning streak and put himself in pretty much probably the #1 contender matchup.
It's unbelievable. Like,
yeah, it's kind of like the same thing as we had with Oliveira. Both these guys are really unlikely to be in this position that they are.
And that 3-fight run has not aged well. I mean, Edson Barboza was still incredible at that time, but he has gotten older.
Old. Yeah.
The draw with Dunham, that was the last. Like, Dunham lost 3 fights after that and was done. Like, he never won again. And then Alexander Hernandez is literally just still in the UFC right now because of that knockout of Dariush. Yeah. That's a great point. That brings us to the main event of UFC 289, a women's bantamweight title fight between defending champ Amanda Nunes and challenger Irene Aldana. Nunes, the 35-year-old Brazilian, is 22-5 overall. She is 15-2 in the UFC. Of those, she is 12-2 at bantamweight. She fought most recently last July, where in the headliner of UFC 277, she got back her bantamweight title from Juliana Pena via dominant unanimous decision. Pena, of course, had dethroned her in the most shocking upset of 2021 in December of that year. So looking to defend her newly regained title for the first time. Admittedly, in the final few fights of her career, it'll remain to be seen whether she defends the bantamweight title again, decides to defend her featherweight title. But for now, The task in front of her is Aldana, who steps in the place of Pena. It was supposed to be a trilogy fight on about 7 weeks' notice, so not exactly short notice. Aldana, 35-year-old from Mexico, is 14-6 overall. She is 7-4 since joining the UFC as a former Invicta FC title challenger. She is on a 2-fight win streak. She most recently appeared back in September of last year, where she knocked out Macy Chasson in the 3rd round with a rare upkick to the body. Prior to that, she had a first-round knockout of Yana Santos. Prior to that, for her last loss, you have to look all the way back to October of 2020, where she dropped a unanimous decision to Holly Holm in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 16. Odds here, I've already let it slip that Nunes is the favorite. No surprise there. I've already let slip that David Dvorak at -500 is the biggest favorite on this card. So, Keith, tell me this. Nunes as the favorite, is it -100 something, -200 something,
No.
-300 something, or -400 something?
Oof. It's either 300 or 400. Definitely. I'll go like -380.
It is -325. Aldana
pretty
plus
close.
250. Yeah, so
Actually, it's actually a lot closer than I thought it would be, but okay.
Tell me how you think this fight plays out.
Yeah, it's an intriguing fight. I mean, we talked about it in the intro. It's a better fight than Nunes versus Jalen Pena, which is ironic considering Pena has a win over Amanda Nunes. Just for stylistically, I think it's intriguing. Now, if I'm Amanda Nunes, like I don't know how many fights she has left, but if she wins this fight, I'm fighting. If I'm Amanda Nunes, I'm fighting one more time, and I'm fighting Jalen Pena. I don't want to have her having that. We both have one win over each other. Like I want to win that trilogy. But I mean, one of the big stories in this week that I've seen so far is that Mexicans can't lose right now. There's something in that water going on. So and Menendez, she's been a little inactive too. Having babies and stuff. And I mean, I know she didn't give birth, but just doing
the time off and everything.
Time off. Yeah. I'm a man. Like I talked about Alex Volkanovski. Like you attract to greatness. And Nunes, I mean, there's no debate. She's the greatest female fighter of all time. There's not. I won't even hear an argument for anybody else. Like it's stupid. There's just certain people that like if they haven't convinced you now, they'll never convince you. If you're arguing Amanda Nunes isn't the greatest female fighter ever, then it's like arguing Tom Brady isn't the greatest football player ever, or whatever. Fill in some other. Like if you're not convinced by now, you'll never be convinced. She has beaten everybody in the conversation. You know what I mean? Like she's beat them all. Yep. So she's a really good athlete, but she's a kickboxer that usually fights orthodox, but switched up to southpaw in the last fight and looked absolutely fantastic from the southpaw stance against Jalen Pena. I've talked about this before. She has those like long Kamaru Usman arm frame where it's deceivingly how long her arms are. She has fast hands, though I do believe I'm seeing a little bit decline in her hand speed, which obviously is going to come. She's 35 years old. She throws tight inside shots, great variety in striking, can hurt you with any blow she throws, including a jab. I mean, she's dropped fighters with a stiff jab, deadly straight right, deadly left hook. Now I love the check right hook from the southpaw stance. If she decides to do that. She can land power shots while being charged at while she's backing up, which is very few fighters can really do. It goes down to her vision. Like she's looking, she's aiming, and she's connecting. She sees everything coming. I mean, she's the hardest hitter. I want to say this, like we think about like hardest hitters in MMA history, and of course we always think of the men. I mean, just Francis Ngannou and who am I thinking of? Derek Lewis, Anthony Rumble Johnson. But like pound for pound, Amanda Nunes is right there. And I don't like comparing a man and women. You just can't do that. But like based on her resume and what she's done, I mean, she's one of the hardest hitters in the history of the sport, regardless of gender. And another thing, she doesn't get enough credit for kicks. Like, she throws hard kicks. I mean, she dropped Pena with the first kick she threw. She knocked out Holly Holm with one of the most beautiful high kicks you've ever seen in your life. She's also an underrated wrestler. She doesn't look to wrestle a lot, but when she does, she's strong on top side, hard to take down because of how wide her base is. She's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. The one thing I'm concerned with her is a little bit is her cardio. In the first fight against Pena, she was slowing down. Now, we didn't see that in her last fight, and we've seen a lot of fights where she's been able to fight deep, but she's getting up there in age, so it is a little bit concerning, especially for someone who throws so many hard shots. Irene Aldana, she's a striker with her hand. She's definitely like a traditional boxer, a high guard defense. She likes to pressure. She likes to force her opponent on her back foot. Though she does struggle a little bit with cutting off the cage. That's why she struggled with the movement of Holly Holm. She's accurate. She's got good accuracy, throws straight shots down the pipe. Her left hook is definitely the punch you got to worry about. That was the one she caught Qileng Vieira with. The one that if she catches him in, it is most likely that shot. She lacks head movement, and she backs straight up in the center line. That's a little concerning in the boxing range. Good kicking game, large kicking like arsenal. She uses those long legs from distance well, but not much offensive grappling. She'll sneak in a takedown here and there, but definitely not what she's looking for. But she's a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, Holly Holm took her down like 5 times. I mean, Holly Holm was like Bo Nickal out there, taking her down like 5 times. I mean, even her last fight is concerning. We all remember that like spectacular like up kick to the liver, which was incredible knockout of Macy Hassan. But Macy Hassan was a close fight heading. I mean, I think it was the 3rd round. I think I had like 1 round each, and Macy Hassan's on top and leading up to that point, or it might have been 2nd round. I apologize if I'm off on the rounds, but Macy Hassan, who was having a lot of success with her grappling too. But Irene Aldana, she does have 3 submissions on a record, so she is a little bit of a submission threat. I'm a little worried about Nunes. I really am. If I was a bettor, I wouldn't bet this fight, or maybe I'd sprinkle a little something out there, but it would be on Aldana in an upset. I'm worried about Nunes's motivation. We haven't really heard much from her. She's that's kind of been her thing a lot, especially lately. But she has a family. She has accomplished everything you can imagine in sport. So, you wonder what gets her to get up in the morning and train as hard as she can. Like, what motivates her? And I do think she showed some signs of decline. I mean, we saw it a little bit in the first fight, Juliana Pena. I still think she showed some signs of slowing down in her second fight. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is the beginning and the end of Amanda Nunes. I can see Aldana cracking her, with the left hook, or just outboxing her, and Nunes's defense starts failing, or her head movement isn't as good, something like that. However, I'm not guessing. Like, I'm saying that they could be. I'm not guessing that's the case. I'm not betting on that Amanda Nunes is done or anything. So don't take that out of context. I'm just saying that it's a possibility that wasn't there 2 years ago, 3 years ago when you were picking Amanda Nunes fights. Amanda Nunes still hits so freaking hard. So, like, it wouldn't surprise me if Amanda Nunes has one of the most spectacular knockouts of her career. Like, that's definitely a possibility. But my prediction is going to be a lot different than I think a lot of people in the MMA world is going to do. With all the skills Amanda Nunes has, she never gets enough credit for her fight IQ. No, I get it. When you see Amanda Nunes, you're seeing speed, you're seeing power, that's what obviously jumps out to her. But she's a smart fighter. I mean, just like the little adjustment she did in the Juliana Pena fight was brilliant. I think she plays it safe, and I think she wrestles Aldana. I think she wrestles Aldana a lot. I think it's going to look like the Jermaine Durandamy fight. Now, Jermaine Durandamy was this great kickboxer who, I mean, if Amanda Nunes stood up and swung it out with Jermaine Durandamy, like, I think there was a very good chance that Amanda Nunes could win that fight. Just swinging it out like she does with a lot of people. But she didn't even bother taking the chance because she knew she was so better on the ground. I think we could see the same thing I see her go. She could outstrike Aldana. She could starch Aldana. But I think she says, "Why even take the chance? I know I'm better on the ground." I think she outwrestles her, and I almost took like a late submission for Nunes, or maybe some late stoppage from ground and pound. But I'll say Aldana makes it to the decision. Give me Nunes by unanimous decision.
I love that you brought that up. Same as for Charles Oliveira that we just talked about. I have some general observations about Amanda Nunes that if you've been listening to these previews for 2 years, yeah, you've probably heard it once or twice before. But considering that every fight we see her may very well be her last, I'm going to subject you to it one more time. I'm going to name some victims here. Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey.
Oh, it's incredible.
Valentina Shevchenko, Chris Cyborg, Holly Holm, Jermaine Durandamy, Julia Budd. Here you go. Amanda Nunes has a stoppage win over every woman who has ever held a title in Bellator or the UFC in either of the divisions in which Nunes fights, except Pena. Pena is the only former champ in either promotion in either division that Nunes has not finished.
But she still has a win over her.
Yeah, and a dominant win at that. Nunes has an under 1 minute knockout of the second best featherweight of all time, Chris Cyborg, or the other of the two best featherweights of all time.
So sorry to interrupt you again. Some might say that the second best female fighter in general.
Yeah.
Or Scott Coker might say it the best.
She has an under 1 minute finish of Ronda Rousey, probably the second best bantamweight of all time, and probably one of the 5 or 10 greatest women ever to do it.
Oh, and
then she also has 2 wins over the greatest flyweight of all time, Valentina Shevchenko. Her resume, just to kind of put all the footnotes to Keith's statement that if you don't think Amanda Nunes is the greatest woman ever to fight, you're just flying in the face of the evidence. It is ridiculous.
You're just trying to be different.
You did a wonderful job kind of laying out her physical tools and her skill set. Those physical tools and those skills combined with her fight IQ and just a little bit of nastiness. Like, she's not a dirty fighter, but she's, once the door closes and the little, pin goes in, she's not in there to make friends. They make her, I think, the nastiest phone booth fighter in MMA history. Like, she's been what Vanderlei Silva was for about 3 years in Pride for like 8 years. Yeah. Which is why, for example, the Felicia Spencer fight was such a shellacking, because you knew that Spencer needed takedowns. You knew she needed to get them from the clinch. So she's just going to have to wade into a minefield. Yeah. I agree with you that the Pena loss was concerning. Maybe she came in overconfident. Maybe she was trying too hard to get a highlight reel finish in the first round. For whatever reason, she gassed out quickly, and Pena took advantage brilliantly. Because of that, I'm glad that she won the rematch the way that she did, because if she came back and just flattened Pena in 3 minutes, the main question would be unanswered. Yeah, instead, we saw that Nunes, same as has always been the case, has plenty of gas to go 5 rounds in a fight where she's dictating the pace. Mm-hmm. Like, she was the fresher fighter in the 5th round of the Pena fight because she was the one who had not been getting her ass kicked.
Yeah.
Aldana is a very good boxer. You pointed out, and she's one of the few fighters that's probably going to have a reach advantage on Nunes. I mean, she might not. Nunes's arms are surprisingly long, but Aldana is going to be taller, and I think the reach will at least be comparable, and throws straight punches and could actually use it to her advantage. She's accurate. She does have good power. She doesn't have Nunes power, but her jab makes women pay attention. But I agree with you. Nunes is too smart not to know where her best route to victory lies. And something that we both kind of talked around this whole time is she has absolutely nothing to prove.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What difference does it make to her legacy, whether she chokes out Aldana in 7 minutes or coasts to a 49-46 decision. It will make no difference whatsoever. The
Yeah.
only thing that could affect her legacy one way or the other, the only thing that could affect her paycheck one way or the other, is if she finds a way to lose this fight. Because of that, I don't know if she will lean on her wrestling as hard as she did in the Durandamy fight, but I expect that she'll use it as a safety valve, or certainly if she has a hard round, or is getting anything she doesn't like the taste of on the feet, like she may just use it as a safety valve and that round's over. Because I think if she gets Aldana down, that's all she wrote. She is a very good grappler. She's physically extremely strong. Aldana is big and strong, but still kind of basic on the ground. Nunes is a fantastic submission artist, but most of the people she's submitted were already hurt really bad first. I can't think of a time where she really just went building blocks, like took somebody down, chipped away, advanced position, took the back, got the choke. It's usually she dropped somebody, jumped on them, and before they knew it was happening, they were choked out, blood spurting out of their face. I'm thinking of like Misha Tate type thing.
Just to jump in there, like she took down Jermaine Durandamy for the entire fight and couldn't get a submission on her. So just add to that point. Yeah.
I'm going to go Nunes by decision here as well. I mean, I could certainly see her getting a finish. If the fight goes the way I think, Aldana's going to take a ton of punishment. If she starts to wear down, if Nunes starts taking her down late and starts really beating her up on the ground, I could see her getting a stoppage in the championship rounds. But I'm going to say she wins by decision here as well. And just one more little footnote on her absolutely ridiculous resume.
Yeah, can I just say something before we close up?
Of course.
You talked about the resume and what she has to prove, anything. You know what's funny? If she gets knocked out, say Aldana just has a night, she knocks her out, Nunes is done, she retires, never fights again. That shouldn't affect her resume. Like it shouldn't affect her legacy. Now there'll always be that one or two idiots out there that says like it's like the people who like hold things against LeBron James now and he lost when he was 40 years old. Like, yeah, he's 40 years old. Like, and guys, I'm not trying to have a LeBron Michael Jordan debate here, so please don't. Like, whoever you think is the best, I agree with you. Okay, but I'm just saying, like, even if she does lose, it shouldn't affect anything. It's miles and miles ahead of the competition for the GOAT and all that stuff. So, just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I agree, but
there'll be some idiot somewhere.
There will be. That's it. That is the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 289, Nunes versus Aldana. I have been Ben. He's been Keith. If this is your first time listening to one of our shows, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you the best combination of actual in-depth analysis, backstory, context, and the occasional side conversation into whatever that you'll find anywhere in the business. Please do like, subscribe, leave us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We're both good about responding. We definitely read them all and appreciate going back and forth with you. But most importantly, join us on the recap. We will be live on the Sherdog YouTube page about 15 minutes after the main event. We will talk about all 11 of these fights, talk about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. And the live chat is open that whole time. So we are taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends who hang out with us after the fights, and we would love to have you join us. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy the fights.